Okay, good morning, all. 16th of November and Monday morning after an incredibly significant weekend, week really for us all, and obviously all thoughts go out to anybody who's in this room with connections with Paris or connections with anyone that's been affected by any of the terrorist attacks over recent weeks, and an absolutely disastrous situation unfolding over the weekend in France and Paris particularly. And I'm sure you were all glued to the news wires as I was. It really was just absolutely out of the blue. If you're watching BBC News on Friday night at 10 o'clock, I'm sure some of you were. It was only right at the end that the news started to come through, and it was almost like just a small sentence or two that was unbelievable, and then sent certainly my household, onto the Twitter feeds, trying to find out what exactly was going on, and it just became worse and worse with every hour, with every unfolding piece of news. So an absolute disaster, an incredibly significant event over the weekend, which I'm sure will be driving certainly our political commentary over coming months, if not longer, if not our economic commentary. And so thoughts out to everyone affected by any of these horrendous and criminal events. Let's have a look at the markets in terms of how there's been a reaction to this atrocity. Interestingly, I think perhaps the clearest picture is being shown by European equities. If you have a look at the DAX, obviously we've gapped lower. We opened significantly lower as money moves away from equities on such a geopolitical crisis and moves into safe haven products such as gold or bonds, and the DAX was down at 1.7% on the open. We've since had a full recovery, however, and the DAX is now trading on the pivot level, not because we are not still, and will be for quite a long time, in an absolute mess of a political situation with ISIS, and I'll be talking about that shortly, but because of the expectations that there could be a reaction from the ECB in order to ensure the economic fallout of this added fear to risk and to the markets does not impact the European recovery. And actually, I think we've got Draghi speaking today at just after 10 o'clock, and it'll be interesting to see if there are any comments at all regarding the easing program in light of this European core disaster. And I think that's why equities have had such a bounce here. There hasn't been any new news on this. There hasn't been any good news. Certainly, I think we're a long way from good news. And equities now looking at perhaps some Draghi resolution. Just of a side note, talking about good news or bad news, it's amazing the timing of these things, isn't it? Friday morning's papers were all covered with the news of the evaporation, quote unquote, of Jihadi John. And that's nowhere to be seen in today's papers, obviously, how quickly things can change. Looking at the safe haven products then, we have gold. Now, I've mentioned this level a number of times in gold, 1073, and you can see that was the 2014 low back in July. That's my Hotcom crash. Testing. 1 second, please. Okay, so having a look at gold, we've talked about this level 1073 on a number of occasions, July low 2014. Gold finding a little bit of a respite here, obviously, as a safe haven metal, but very, very, very much on the back foot. I'm a long way from getting back into the bullish camp on gold, of course. The euro is suffering for a couple of reasons. I think this euro is going to continue to stay heavy. Well, two reasons, obviously. Perhaps the impact that such atrocities can have on confidence in the eurozone, unlikely, but there is that factor of geopolitical weight. But secondly, should Draghi respond to the fears of an attack like this perhaps having any chance of derailing confidence in the Eurozone, he will then act and he will then engage in loss of sound again. 1 second. Guys, Hotcom's having a bit of a tantrum this morning, so I'm not going to waffle unnecessarily. The best article that I have read, not only on the attacks and not only on the disastrous event over the weekend, but also on what can we do now, is in the big read of the FT. This is the most intelligent review that I've read that really explains the conflict in the Middle East and the complications of the Middle East. You know, where we're talking about different groups with different interests, the Kurds, the Shias, the Sunnis, all with different ideologies. It is incredibly hard to try and mitigate or understand even what these terrorists want, when there's so many different moving parts to the organization. If you look at it in a number of ways, you've got ISIS being a deep enemy of Hezbollah, Hezbollah being a deep enemy of Israel, Israel being a close ally of the US being fighting against the rebels and ISIS in Syria, but then Russia taking the same side whilst having the opposite side. It's just a disaster. And trying to find out exactly the best path to try and find a solution here is incredibly difficult, and it's an incredibly long road indeed. So I think that from my point of view, there has to be a retaliation, there has to be a reaction, but it must be calm and measured, and more importantly, acute. And by acute, I mean spending a lot of money, sending the absolute excellence in service personnel to not take out the young kids who are lost. And again, here you've got another example, a petty criminal in France who's lost in his way and being snapped up by the people behind the scenes, behind the internet wires. It's to find those people, to find the people who are orchestrating it from a higher level, and to stop it at its source rather than at its end. And unashamedly spend a lot of money and put a lot of resources behind doing that. Article 5 in the UN resolution, if that gets agreed upon, that will certainly allow those funds, those unilateral international funds, to be released in order to do so. Okay guys, I'm going to pause here. I'm obviously having some Hotcom issues, so I'm going to come back on the mic, and perhaps without sharing my screens. I'll speak to you soon.